Calling all beings. Calling all beings.
Yeah! Welcome back to Calling All Beings. It is a wonderful, wonderful Thursday night where we're going to welcome back a special guest, or welcome a special guest that we haven't had on forever, but we have been chasing this, trying to get this interview for some time. Thank God for Debs. I'm your host, DJ, super excited, and here joining me is the co-creator, the co-conspirator, the executive producer, and technical director of this joint, my brother, Money Nathan.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Also, Happy New Year. First show of 2024. Really excited to do this one. I've been looking forward to it all day, and it's been a slog of a day for me, so I'm really glad to be here. Good to see y'all.
Totally. And like I said earlier, this would not have happened without our center of the CAB universe, our counselor, our researcher, and our paragon of virtue, a study of UAP, Debs. What's up, homegirl? Thank you so much for hooking this up, Debs.
I don't feel like I deserve any credit, but I appreciate that. I just want to say hello and Happy New Year, everybody. I hope that we have a wonderful 2024. I'm excited.
You do deserve it. We love you, Debs. But before we get to the guest of honor, would like to promo one of our homies on Calling All Beings. And that is, of course, our homie Vinny Adams, the host of Disclosure Team. This man has a lot of followers. You may have seen him on the that symposium that was in France. It was done in both English and French. He has traveled internationally as an MC and a speaker, and his profile is just growing and growing in the community, Nathan.
Vinny is fantastic. If you haven't caught his show, head on over to that on YouTube. You can also find him on X at Disclosure Team _ or Instagram at Disclosure_team. Vinny's cranking out great work. He's been in this space for a very long time, and I know he's got some really exciting shows lined up for 2024.
Debs, why don't I say like Vinny is able to, he's sort of an insider where he has access to a lot of insider sources. He talks to people on both sides of the pond. He can be like, Lou, it's Vinny. What's up, man? What's the latest? He really does bring a lot. Plus, he's a kind of a researcher like yourself.
Yes, and he's got a very even keel approach to things that everyone appreciates.
He does. He's definitely not a knucklehead like me. So go check out Disclosure Team. You see him right there on X and Instagram where he started this whole thing. And of course, you can find his YouTube, Vinny Adams. Nathan, our special guest, not only is a retired lieutenant commander from the Navy, FA-18 pilot. She is a scholar in residence at the University of Colorado. I read here on her bio, she's an alumnus of the Illinois Math and Science Academy, received her BS in civil engineering from George Washington University, and graduated from the DLI, where she learned to speak Dari and Farsi so she could engage in some engineering reconstruction duties, and got time on the ground over there in Afghanistan with our partners over there. And I know it's something that touched her heart a lot, and I wish I would have had that opportunity as well. That is awesome. She earned her MBA from GW University, and then you know what, Nathan? She was a little bit bored and decided, you know what? Maybe I'll go to flight school for maybe one of the most complex aircraft in the entire United States inventory, Navy or Air Force, and became an FA-18 pilot. So, without further ado, party people, put those hands together for Lieutenant Commander retired Miss Alex Dietrich. Can I get it? Amen.
Amen.
Welcome.
Hi. How do you hear?
Got you loud and clear, Alex. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Glad to be here.
It's good. It's good to have you. I hope we didn't shock you with that intro, but that's how excited we are to have it. And that's how excited the community loves you. Do you know this?
I feel the love.
You
I'm feeling it right now. It's happening right now. Thank you.
The community really does love you. I mean, they really and truly do. That's what Julie's saying. Amen. But Alex, for my first question, what do you miss most about flying?
Oh man, the clouds.
Really? Just just being up there, being
Being in the
VFR,
clouds.
but being able to see beautiful clouds.
Yeah.
Wow. I knew that you really love clouds, but I was surprised by that answer. It's a great answer. It's very peaceful once you level off in altitude and you pull the throttles back and it's kind of quiet. That's neat. Awesome.
Yeah.
Great answer. Let me turn you over to the co-creator of this joint, my co-conspirator, Money Nathan.
Alex, it's great to have you with us. Big fan of yours, as DJ said. Been following you for a long time on the social space, and following along with your journey as well. You've done a lot of kind of testimony of your experience, and you've been observing the UFO community. Almost like I look at your posts, it's almost like you're an ethnographer in some respects. You're curious about what people are doing and how this sort of manifests out in the wild. But recently, at the end of 2023, you posted to the effect of that you were kind of looking to make more of a commitment to get more engaged in the UFO topic in 2024. And I just wanted to know, could you speak to that? What's been the change, or what are you looking to do as the year progresses here?
Sure. Well, this incident that pulled me into this topic happened almost 20 years ago now. And I've never felt that it's defined me. I've never identified as a UFO person. And it wasn't until the 60 Minutes piece came out in 2021 that it really sort of exploded in terms of taking up so much time and energy with interviews and requests to talk about it. And because it wasn't a passion, because it wasn't something that I was sort of genuinely, intrinsically interested in, I just felt sort of bothered and annoyed and drained by all of the attention and all of the requests. And there was a point last summer when I realized, or I had this moment of saying, hey, Al, this isn't going to go away. You will always and forever be associated with this. And so rather than fight it or rather than resist it, you might as well turn into it and lean into it and figure out a way to find some not just joy. I mean, I had found joy before in terms of this, you're right, this sort of being curious about the space. And I really enjoyed the humor and the art and the whatever that intro was, the energy there. DJ, it's fascinating to me. But I also kind of said, hey, I need to stop and listen rather than dismissing all of these other parallel conversations that people are having in this space. And I would kind of say, well, what does that have to do with me or what I saw? And so I'm listening. So 2024 is my year of listening.
That's fantastic. Well, it's really great to have you with us. Really looking forward to this conversation. And I know my co-host here has an excellent question lined up for you. So Deb, go ahead and take it away.
I'm so glad you mentioned 60 Minutes because one of my first questions would be if you could do it over again and you could add on some more information that you now know and more about organizations that you're now part of, which hasn't really been mentioned yet. What would you do with 60 Minutes now?
60 Minutes now. I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I will tell you that when we did it, part of the reason I agreed to do it was because 60 Minutes was such a reputable platform. They had not just the reputation of good journalism, but they had a whole team of producers doing research. For weeks, we were in contact with them, having hours of conversations. They were fact-finding. We were giving them material and points of contact. And so I really felt confident that they were going to do the story justice. I hadn't actually watched an episode of 60 Minutes since probably I was little and watched it with my grandparents. So
what?
I didn't, yeah. So I had forgot the format. And so, you know, they did all of this research and they interviewed us on the day of when David Fravor and I sat down for hours, and they asked, you know, a whole list of questions that they hadn't provided to us in advance. You know, it was all on the spot, but they asked the questions and then they went back and asked them again and sort of reworded them or just phrased them a little bit different. And so, you know, I felt that at the end of that, when they wrapped and broke down all of their, you know, big fuzzy microphones and cameras, I thought, man, okay, they've captured it, right? They have the whole story. There's nothing left to tell. But all of those hours and hours and hours and hours, they distill down into like a 10-minute segment. And so not that I'm looking for more airtime, but, you know, I was hoarse from talking so much. But then, you know, the clip of it is 30 seconds, and that just really didn't satisfy anybody when it actually aired. And then I was bombarded with all of these additional requests for interviews. Another note about 60 Minutes is that I showed up that day of filming with, I brought my helmet bag full of material. I brought books and my flight log and everybody wants to see my contemporaneous notes, the notes that I took on November 14, 2004. I brought those with me to the studio, and I laid everything out. I had my dog tags. I had, you know, my boots, and I thought that they might want to do some shots, you know, still frames or, and it was funny because the producers looked at. Oh, and I also brought patches for all of the crew. So VFA 41 patches, and I gave it to the camera guy and the sound guy, and so I laid it all out on a table, and I said, here, if you're curious, these are the documents or the references that are, you know, things that I was referring to in our phone calls. And the producer said, oh yeah, well, that's not really our format. Like, we don't really do that. And so I said, okay, you know, I packed it all back up in the bag, and they said, but we do need to get a shot of you walking outside, right? That is our format. So we went outside the building and just sort of walked up and down the block, and I felt really silly because we weren't actually talking about anything. It was just getting B-roll for their, you know, for how they build their segments. And then I packed up and I moved across country. So all of that stuff went into a storage locker. You know, everything when you move kind of gets jumbled up like a snow globe. And then, you know, that summer everybody was saying, where are the notes? Where are the notes? And I said, I just had them. And, you know, so I don't know if that answers your question about what I would do differently or what 60 Minutes might want to do differently.
I think that was an interesting backstory about what that was like for you, though, for sure. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Alex, just a little bit of a preamble before the question. I sort of have your friend and your skipper, and I know that Dave, even though your friends will always be skipper to you, just like, you know, the guy I mentioned in my text, Troy, will always be, you know, commander to me, even though he's my friend and we share phone calls and stuff. But I had a UFO sighting as a kid at about 14 with another kid. And throughout my career, which was something like 8 years of maintenance and 13 years of flying, I never would mention anything about my UFO sighting. And I was an MMA podcaster for years about the UFC. And it wasn't until I saw Dave on Joe Rogan's show and I told my MMA podcast co-host that I was so moved. I said, if Dave can talk about this, and I didn't know you yet, I wasn't aware of you yet. I can talk about this. And that was it. And then they said they did not want to do a UFO podcast. So I bid them farewell. And then I found Nathan and found Debs and I started initially just me, but then thankfully I found him. So I have you guys to thank, because there are other military folks and aviators that are talking about it because you are talking about it. And Dave talked about it. So tell him I said thanks when you talk to him. It really is emotional, because I would not have done this, I don't think, if it wasn't for someone that another aviator, did this and said, yeah, we saw something. And so what? As far as things that you've heard, I know we could get into the conference, but I'm fascinated. We were so moved by the commentary of David Grush, who's, in a way sort of a contemporary of yours. You're both officers, even though he wasn't a flyer and stuff. Is there something particularly striking that he said to you that you found striking or jarring in any way, or that maybe confirmed something that you had suspected?
So I haven't actually had a conversation with David Grush. I know that he
But
gave
the interview.
keynote at this whole conference.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So he gave the keynote address at the end of the Seoul conference in Stanford, which I attended, and he was zooming in. So he was up on the screen, but I haven't actually had a chance to connect and have a conversation with him.
Regarding like the Ross Coulthard interview or his testimony with Dave and Ryan is more what I was thinking.
Oh, the testimony last summer before Congress.
Yes.
So I actually would have liked to have two separate hearings or two separate testimonies, because especially the way that they were physically positioned at the table, I thought that Ryan Graves and David Fravor were talking about aviation concerns, pilot safety. If we have unidentified things flying around in our airspace, that's national security concern. It's also a safety of flight issue. And then you had David Grush raising concerns that are certainly alarming and worth investigating further. But I felt that it was disjointed or disconnected in the way the conversation flowed, and it didn't really allow. I felt like we were mixing messages, and that was maybe confusing for the members and certainly for the audience that was trying to follow along.
Okay. So nothing that he said was particularly nothing that you had heard from him had a particular effect on you, or that you found the most interesting?
I mean, everything he said was interesting, certainly. I think like a lot of people, I'm waiting to hear more and see more evidence. And, I look to those members of Congress who have promised to follow through and make sure that, especially we're running to ground the issues, the concerns about, the spending and how we're allocating and holding our contractors accountable for their activities. So, it's hard to know, how to react when there's such a, yeah.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
It really is. Okay. I had to take a shot at it. I mean, we were, we were speaking privately, Debs and myself and Nathan, and there were very different aspects that affected each of us differently, but it was Nathan, before you're going to ask Alex a question, but what would you use to describe how you felt in those succeeding days after he came out and spoke with Ross?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's I think a lot about the stigma, and sort of, as DJ, you were talking about the stigma that you felt kind of reporting, and for Dave to kind of sit there and reveal the things that he has said and like you say, Alex, I'm waiting to know more. I want to know more about these allegations and the evidence that he's supposedly provided to the Inspector General. But it's a little bit jarring, for me to hear those things said out loud that have been a part of kind of the UFO lore or entertainment even for the last many decades. And so for him to sort of say some of those things in a public way and to have said that he's brought that in testimony to to officials, that there's a kind of a weird like disconnect in my mind about that. And that kind of feeds into some of my question for you, Alex, and that's how deep we are moving in terms of the stigma and reporting. And it seems like we've come a pretty good ways there, but are you hearing that more folks are comfortable bringing their experiences forward? I know Ryan's done a lot of work in the space as well, but is that so your experience, are you hearing from colleagues and others that this is a little bit easier to talk about when people have had these kinds of experiences?
I hope so. And, certainly that's the hope of Americans for Safe Aerospace. That's the organization that you're referring to with Ryan Graves, an offshoot of the AIAA organization. And so really our hope is that by having these conversations, by making it a matter of fact, encouraging scientific rigor, academic review, that we reduce the stigma and we make it mainstream, that when media is covering it, that they don't play the spooky music and giggle at the beginning of segments. Yeah, and that's part of my motivation in doing this. I feel an obligation as a former military officer that if citizens are curious and concerned, that I respond to that, but then also that by speaking about it, if people, it doesn't have to be pilots or aircrew, it could be, I took a train this summer and the conductor, without me bringing up anything about UAPs, he volunteered. He was talking about it with some other passengers. And I thought, well, yeah, people on trains that are, is it the engineer that drives it or the conductor? Whoever it is, right? They're sober, they're on duty, they're looking outside, and they have a lot of opportunity to witness things. And not to suggest, I think it would be really irresponsible of me to suggest that any or all of the unidentified things that we're seeing in the sky are, from another place or non-human intelligence. But, just like when you take the subway in New York City, there are big signs that say, if you see a suspicious package, or a bag left unattended, if you see something, say something. And so I think it makes sense to encourage a culture where that's normalized. You see something weird in the sky, and then also to enable reporting. So to have a channel, to have a mechanism where you can actually file that report and give a description, and then it makes it to first responders or someone who can actually do something with the information. Right.
If I could ask a quick kind of tag along to that, I wondered what was your reaction at the beginning of 2023, where we had the sort of the UAP flyovers over the United States. We had the Chinese spy balloon shot down, and we had these other objects that were encountered, but we don't know a whole lot about them. So what was your sort of take on that? And have you heard anything from maybe aircrew that were involved in some of those other encounters?
Yeah, so, I thought that was a great opportunity for everyone who's advocating for, who's lobbying for systematic, methodical, serious UAP infrastructure, from reporting to investigating to analyzing. I think all of us kind of said, see, told you, this is serious, and I thought that was a good opportunity to rally around, the real sort of tangible. It was just trundling across, the continental United States for days.
Right.
So, Yeah, I thought that was a great example that captured the collective attention and forced everyone to have some real conversations about it. So,
Are you surprised we haven't seen more detail there? There was, I think, an event that was over, maybe it was the Black Sea, I can't recall, but there was, an adversarial fighter had dumped some of their tanker fuel.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a photo, from the cockpit of, I guess it was maybe a drone. that we
MQ-9.
had. Yeah, and the very clear, crystal clear photo of that encounter, and yet we've seen no photos of these other, UAP that were engaged off the coast of Alaska or what have you. Is that surprising to you, or just kind of does it frustrate you in any way, particularly if we're talking about trying to get more transparency around this particular topic?
No, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't surprise me. Part of the issue with that sort of imagery or it's not necessarily that the images themselves are classified, but the sources and methods of obtaining them might be classified. So just having operated in that environment for a long time with those systems, I'm not surprised that we don't have access to all of the information, and I don't feel entitled to it. I'm retired now, and I am just a civilian living in jeans and flip-flops. But I don't have that sense of urgency for, quote unquote, transparency or disclosure, whatever that means. But that's part of my 2024 resolution, is to kind of understand why people are crying for it, why they're demanding it, and what it means. What does it mean to you? What is transparency and discllosure? What is the?
It's a great question. I mean, and it is. Everyone's going to give you a different answer to that. I think. I think at a very basic level, for what you're advocating for, let's get more information and more eyes on whatever is in our airspace, so that we have more data about it, and we can be more candid with our personnel who happen to be in that space, but also, the American people or the people of the world, about things that are in the air that are encountered. I'm not naive in thinking they should tell us everything. I think that would be foolish and not helpful, for national security reasons. I think just starting there would be great. But it's such a complex problem, because when you have an encounter like the one that you had, where this anomalous behavior is witnessed, and you have an historical record that includes a lot of similar anomalous encounters, experiences, there are a lot of things that begin sort of, at least from my perspective, coming into the possibility space. I'm not willing to weigh, affirmatively on one or the other, but it does open up a lot of questions as to, how far back does this go? What are the nature of these experiences? How much information does the U.S. government actually have about objects like this? All these things are on the table. And so I would I think just as a tax-paying public person, like to know, more about what we know. I don't have any delusions that we're going to hear the whole truth. I think that would be ridiculous, but I think they know a lot more than they're sharing. And I think it's helpful to know more about that.
So that's a good, from just a citizen, to hear that, someone who hasn't been involved in the national security apparatus, that just, I feel, actually we got to go to Debs. So I don't want to cut you off, Debs. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, I think it's such a conundrum. So recently I was talking to DJ about someone who witnessed something on a base. I won't go into details because some people are just going to raise their eyebrows, but over and over again, there are military encounters with these objects. And the conundrum is that they told the people who are supposed to protect us not to report, right? So I guess my question is, with the organization that you're now working with, Americans for Safe Aerospace, are you seeing a pushback to try to help really make us safer? Because it's ridiculous that they would ever tell someone to be quiet about something they didn't know about flying in our skies, especially now when we have drones and all kinds of other things and these balloons, and all these other things to be worried about. It's boggles the mind that they would ever tell someone to be quiet about it. So, are you seeing some success with your group?
So I'm having a hard time following. Who is they in this example? Who they
I
have been, they have
Is
told them to
is
be quiet?
the Americans for Safe Aerospace seeing some success with getting past this quieting of military folks that's been happening for decades?
So I don't know about that. You know, it sounds a little conspiratorial. I had a UAP encounter and I was never told to be quiet about it. It was never classified. We were never required to sign an NDA. There were never men in black that came and took tapes or, you know, removed data or anything like that. So I haven't had that experience, and I don't know of anybody else who has. Again, on my listening tour in 2024, you know, if people want to share those stories with me, I'm happy to listen and be open-minded to hear more about it. But I have not witnessed or felt that pressure to be silent or be quiet and not talk about it.
Yeah, Ryan.
You know, ASA, Americans for Safe Airspace, is trying to go ahead.
No, there was a big
we
delay. I
frozen?
didn't hear it. Yeah, I think there was a little bit of freezing. It might have been me that was frozen, but are we good to go now? Everybody loud and clear?
Yeah, sounds good.
Unclear here. So the Americans for Safe Airspace is trying to advocate for you know, the reduction in stigma and the systematic reporting for primarily aircrew and folks involved in the aerospace industry. So I haven't witnessed and I haven't heard in an official capacity about anyone being silenced or pressured into, you know, keeping an encounter secret.
I can introduce you to some people on that if you need me to. But unfortunately, I shouldn't laugh. It's not funny, but yes, it's definitely been an issue. I'm glad that you didn't have to go through that.
I've seen Ryan put some. He's put out the stats, and I didn't have that prepared for tonight. But Ryan has said he's hearing from a lot of aviators, both civil and military aviators. Ben Hansen is also hearing from a lot of military and civil aviators with their encounters. So that's a good thing, though, Debs. That's a good sign. But I mean, if you went back to 1986, those JAL pilots that encountered that, those 747 pilots that encountered that UFO over Alaska, I mean, that guy was fired. so, so you know, I don't know. I guess I haven't heard of a lot of military folks that have had encounters because people just didn't talk about it. I will tell you, having just left an airbase, that I could have this conversation now in the squadron and not be laughed at. I was talking to some AC-130 gunship guys because I know, you know, the sensors they have on there are awesome, and so they could have a Visob there, and they had no problem talking about it. They didn't laugh or giggle or say, get out of here or anything like that. So, and there also is now an AFSOC OI that deals with, I got a report on that. What did I tell you guys about 5 months ago? There's an AFSOC OI about reporting UAPs, and that never happened before. So we are making some progress. So obviously Matt Gates, we don't know what aircraft, but Matt Gates interviewed one of the crew members from Eglin that had that sighting over the Eglin range and showed him, I think they showed him some FMV and a snapshot, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if anybody knows, but so, it's slow going, but it's happening. So, Alex, your resume is so impressive. Can you tell us about the steeplechase thing that I read on there? Is that basically you're an equestrian? Is that what I'm to understand, or no?
So it's track and field steeplechase.
Oh,
so
tell me.
Okay. So I think there is a steeplechase for horses, but that's a different sport. I ran track and field cross country through high school and college, and after having my 3 kids, have gone back as a master's athlete, so master's track and field. And so that's where, I don't know if you've ever watched the local news and they say, oh, you know, this 100-year-old man from Iowa ran the 100-meter dash in 45 seconds. You know, he's like going in slow motion, but he's going. So, you know, they have all these different age groups. And so I enjoy doing the training for and competing in the steeplechase. And so that's where they have the hurdles around the track, the fixed barriers, and then the water barrier that you jump into.
That is so awesome. That is so awesome. By the way, the time you described the 100-year-old man, that's about like what my 40 time is right now. So
Yeah.
at 57, I'm a consistent runner, but I'm such a slow runner. It's ridiculous. But
Just
you know what
getting
I was
out
thinking,
there.
Nathan? Well, exactly, being out there. You know, I kind of was thinking, Nathan, before the show, was like, I'm sort of a jack of all trades that's not really good at anything. And Alex is sort of like a jack of all trades that's mastered a lot of different things.
Very impressive. Yes.
It is, man. Your resume, I was thinking, so I kind of was going over jobs that I would nominate Alex for if I had the power. And this is sort of the short list I've come up with. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. House Majority Leader, Senate Majority Leader, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Vice President, even President. I mean, I think that's a reasonable list. Don't you, Money? Come on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get my vote for sure.
You have my vote, Alex. Okay.
No, I appreciate that.
We could have a platform of more exercise and more academics. So like, you must have been like an amazing student. Yeah. Were you like, did you get like really high GPAs in both your undergrad and your postgrad work?
So when I talk to my students and I advise them now, and when they are in ROTC or at the Naval Academy wanting to fly, they come and they say, what's the secret sauce? You know, how do I want to go jets, I want to go aviation. And I tell them, I say, look, I'm not smarter than anybody, and you know, I didn't study harder than anybody else, but I slept more than anybody in flight school and in college. I think, again, because I was running and I also rode crew, if you're familiar with that.
Wow.
So I was up early and I was, you know, putting in a lot of time on the erg and miles on the track. And so I was exhausted 8 p.m. and I would just crash and I would sleep for more than the recommended 8 hours. You know, I'd get 9 or 10 hours of sleep at night. But we know from, you know, we don't know a lot about sleep, but we do know that that's when you crystallize the memories and process everything you learned that day. So, yeah, I didn't really study for tests or things like that. I just stayed awake in class, absorbed it, and then slept and sort of downloaded it. So same thing in flight school. I would show up for events where you need reaction time, you need to remember checklists or systems, and it just came to me because I was awake and alert. Where I think a lot of my friends, especially the folks from the academy, you know, they kind of deprive them when they're there of freedoms. So when they hit flight school, they kind of go crazy and party a lot and show up hungover. So yeah, that's what I attribute my success to. Being unconscious.
I agree with you 100% about that. I don't know that I slept as well as you, but I do know that studying a lot was I was sort of a special ed student, so I felt I needed to study harder than the next guy, so that when I did show up for a one-on-one with my instructor, or I had a flight that, you know, that I was really prepared, or especially like if you're doing an EPE, you know, before your check ride, you know, all that stuff. So anyway, let's get some of we only have about 20 minutes left with you, so I want to get to some of the questions in the chat, and we'll do them like sort of in quick hitter fashion if we can, so because I know the cabbies have more as well. So this is coming from Mick, our friend from the UK.
West?
What's that?
Not that Mick.
Oh, not no, he's not that Mick. He's an experiencer Mick. is one of those people that is able to. He's a medium, if you will, for connecting with spirits and so forth. Hey, Alex, you had a chance to have contact with alleged entities. Would you take it if you had that chance, offered the chance to have in-person contact with an entity?
I mean, my initial reaction is to say yes, but also I don't know what that means, and I don't know exactly what we're talking about. So,
Okay.
You know, if we are talking about some extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence, you know, I have all sorts of questions about safety and you know, consequences and everything else. So the curious Alex is like, yeah, you know, let's do it. But then the conscientious Alex is saying, well, what does that mean? And what what's involved exactly?
Let me frame it. I can frame it this way. So we did have an Air Force OSI officer named Rick Doty that's a friend of ours. He had said that there was a being that they got out of the Roswell crash, and they assigned an Air Force linguist, someone who had been to DLI like yourself, to be his handler. And until it or he or she would have died a few years later. Then David Grush said that biologics were recovered. He did not characterize whether they were dead or alive or whatever, but at least that's a couple of sources. And then there's a couple more sources on that. So if in that controlled environment where it would, you know, it was basically, you know, in the control under the control of the U.S. military, and you could have an interview room with them. So I'm assuming you'd say yes. So,
Yes.
okay, I figured you would, because based on the beginning of your answer. So this is from Carolina Garcia. This is Vinny Adams' girlfriend / fiance. She says, my 5-year-old is asking, do you think it was a spaceship from another planet? Meaning what you encountered, from her 5-year-old.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what we saw that day. I'm wondering what the 5-year-old's name is. Hi, little one.
Hey, Carol, what's your son or daughter's name? I did get to meet Carolina a couple weeks ago, but I hadn't met her kids. So,
So you know, I don't know, and it would be irresponsible of me to speculate. So we don't know whether it was, you know, an adversary. We don't know if it was a billionaire messing around with some tech. We don't know, and so again, the part of why I'm here and talking and encouraging folks, if you see something, to say something, to report it. And to use, you know, you don't necessarily have to be a military aviator and have or have a pilot's license and go to something like ASA, Americans for Safe Aerospace. I'm an advisor to Enigma Labs, and so they are trying to create a platform, an app that anybody can download onto their phone, and we can crowdsource. So not just that you could report your own sighting, but also you can sign up to get notifications. Normally I say no to all of the push notifications on apps. But on this one, I get notified if a neighbor or somebody in my vicinity has a sighting. And so it goes ding, and I go, oh, let me look up, let me go outside and see if I can see and maybe capture. Maybe I have a better camera or binoculars or night vision goggles or FLIR or something else that we can get different angles and corroborate the report and build this, you know, through a hive mind, this collective intelligence that's open source, right? That doesn't, none of that is classified or requires, you know, release authorization from the DoD or others. So I don't know what we saw November 14th, 2004, but be curious and keep looking up.
Yeah, I had a tangential question, so I might as well get it in real quick before we get Julie's question in here, our chat moderator. As an aviator, when at first glance, your first visual observation, what did it feel like to? Because I've never like I told you I had a sighting when I was a kid walking on a ranch, but I've never had, like, as an aviator, never like, where you're trained, and especially fighter pilots, you guys, your eyeballs are trained to identify things in the air more so than other aircraft communities. So what was the feeling that you had when you first looked at it?
It didn't make any sense. Yeah, it was just confusion because it didn't fit any of our mental models. It wasn't, we practice recce, we practice looking at similar and dissimilar aircraft, and we'd seen balloons and buoys and all sorts of things, but it didn't fit.
Interesting. Yeah. That's what I thought you were going to say, but yeah, just like to hear it from somebody that was there. Okay, that's my last question about that. Okay, Julie, have you experienced any further anomalous activity in your lifetime before or after your famous sighting, ghosts, psi activity, etc.? Have you ever had any other experiences like that?
I went on a ghost tour this summer, which was fun. It was in Block Island, and it was fun to hear the stories, and they had like a thermometer and a couple of different devices that they gave us, but I don't think we actually encountered anything. No, I mean, I haven't really, like I said, I haven't been open to these other parallel conversations that kind of get tossed in, and I've always been resistant, because I said, well, what does that have to do with seeing something unidentified off the coast of Southern California? Like, what does the ghost conversation have to do with it? And so I'm not dismissing it now. I'm just saying I don't get it. I don't get why they're mentioned in the same conversation or in the same space. Maybe you can help me.
Nathan, why are they mentioned? Nathan, why are they mentioned in the same?
I'll do the best I can. It gets to some of the complexity that Deb was talking about in the history of this particular topic, and people who've experienced or claim to have experienced encounters with objects like this, and sometimes the occupants of objects like this. And some of those encounters involve what people would call like a mental experience, like either telepathy, or after having that experience, they have some sort of enhanced cognitive ability, like they maybe precognition or telekinesis. I mean, again, these are things that are just reported. Like you, I need more evidence to see the veracity of that. But this is just a part of the literature and the body of experience literature around this particular topic. And so that then ventures into conversations about really what we are as human beings, what consciousness is. As we all know, we experience reality through our senses. There's a lot happening in reality that is outside of our scope of perception. And so when you have encounters, reported encounters, like what I just described, or even parallel encounters with ghosts in particular, like I know you've probably heard the name of Whitley Strieber, but he had an encounter where he claimed to have seen an entity, but also seen ghosts of the deceased basically at the same time. And so it calls into question kind of what's really going on there. And famous researchers like Jacques Vallée have also studied this as well, and that it just opens up a whole host of questions. What is really happening here? What is the root of the experience? What is reality, or how much of it can we actually interface with? And so I think that's probably where some of these questions come from. It's individuals looking for an overarching sort of meta explanation for anomalous experience that have been reported throughout history from the human family. And it may not be one single thing, right? It may be a variety of things. It's tempting to lump everything into one bucket, but that may be just an incorrect assumption, right? So, but that's sort of where some of that is coming from.
Thank you for that. And I will say that at the conferences in Stanford and in New York in December, I was exposed to, but I wasn't quite following, and I have a lot of follow-up reading that I need to do. And I think what you're talking about, this consciousness and its soul. At Stanford, there was a presenter, Dr. Aya Whiteley, who is a
She's like a flight doc for NASA.
flight doc, right?
Yeah.
For NASA, for these astronauts and aviators. And she did, in the course of her presentation, catch my attention when she referred to the ghost in the cockpit, which I had never heard it referred to as that before. But when she described it, and, she built up to it, and I said, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what that is." And it is referring to this flow that we get into when we have checklists and a real intimacy with, all of our switches and dials and knobs and everything. And so it's this merging of the tech with the senses and so that spoke to me, and I look forward to following up and reading more of her work. So in that case, I have seen the ghost in the cockpit.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think all of us have an experience that's similar to that. At least when you talk about flow state, I hope that everybody has experienced flow state in some form or fashion, whether they're, they're exercising and ideas kind of happen, or their creativity gets going, or they're working, or whatever it may be. Flow state is I think a great feeling to have when things are really clicking. I think people have also experienced a lot of similar things that we would call, bizarre. The best example I can give of this is something a lot of people have experienced, where you're thinking of that person, you haven't talked to them in months or years, and you get a phone call from them like moments after that. And a lot of people have reported that happening, and it's bizarre. Could it be entirely coincidental? Absolutely. But it's just an example of a non-normal experience, abnormal experience that seems to happen with at least some degree of regularity in the human experience of life. And so it calls into question, I think, what's really happening in lived experience. And there are a lot of people who are trying to study that, tap into that, and question some of the models that we have around how reality actually functions. Our operating model now is primarily one of materialism, that tiny little objects essentially stack up into larger objects, and then eventually you get consciousness that just emerges from this conglomeration of neuronal activity in the brain. Well, that may be an incorrect assumption. Maybe consciousness is actually at the root level of reality, and matter actually stacks up off of that. And if that's true, it changes a lot of the way in which we look at experience, particularly when it comes to anomalous experience, like we've talked about on the show.
See why we hired him?
Free of charge. Yeah.
I love it. Man, they really are. The communities really will try to be distinct from one another. The Bigfoot, up here at Colorado, there's some pretty prodigious Bigfoot researchers up there, and there are some encounters that are very, very flesh and blood, but there are also some things that Bigfoots will do that are out of step with what we know in terms of, mind speak, projecting fear, infrasound, and projecting fear into somebody to get them to turn around and walk away. There's certain things, but these communities don't. A lot of things are about identification. You said earlier, I'm not a UFO person. I don't identify as a UFO person. I'm just analyzing something that's happening that, has, made itself present in our reality. Ryan had sightings. You and Dave had sightings. Airline pilots have had sightings. I had a sighting. And then we've talked to people that have had, like Jim Semivan, who was a retired CIA counterintelligence officer, and said that he had an encounter in his bedroom with his wife there. I have to take that very seriously and say that someone like Jim Semivan is not given to making things up. And there's many others on top of that. So, but I don't consider myself a UFO person, or that I need to be in that box. or unnecessarily a Bigfoot person, or just somebody who is interested in some of these, what our friend Matt says, the unexplained. So anyway, there's my $2 contextualization for you.
I want to make sure we get back to Deb. In case
Deb's. Yeah, we got 5 minutes
before the end of the hour here.
Yep.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Deb.
I just wanted to say to all of that ultimately, we don't even know about our own bodies. Like I was thinking about how many specialists we need just to understand our own bodies, the bodies that we move around in every day, right? So the subject is more about us trying to figure ourselves out and where we are in this great big universe sometimes than it is about anything else, which is intriguing. And it leads to my question, which you kind of touched on this a little bit, but there are a lot of rabbit holes in this topic, a lot of things you could go down and try to learn about. What are you most interested in learning more about?
That's a good question.
It is.
Yeah. So I need to learn more about the history. So there are cases and encounters and people that you're referring to, and if I look like a blank slate, it's because I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm not trying to be aloof or snobby. I don't know. I thought that Foo Fighters was just a band. I didn't know until recently that was a World War II UFO UAP thing. So, I need to wade through all of that and also, figure out what is legitimate and what is bogus. I do really appreciate it. I saw there was a comment here in the chat about Mick West. I appreciate him, and I appreciate folks like him who are, creating that tension and asking the hard questions. I really enjoyed his book about rabbit holes, right? Escaping the rabbit hole. And I'd recommend it to folks. So, having a balanced approach to investigating the history while also encouraging and supporting this initiative through ASA, through Enigma, through other lines of effort to capture the future encounters in a way that we have evidence and that it's documented in a repository that's less controversial or less politicized than any of the previous attempts at it. So in terms of specific subjects, I really am interested in this phenomenon behind the phenomenon, if I can say that. So, how many of these podcasts are there? Like, how many people have either made this, their job or their hobby? How many books are there? How many conferences? How many conversations are being had about this? And it's the psychology of it and the economy of it, and just what's happening here, regardless of the facts of what we're seeing. So that's interesting to me. What else is interesting? Well, I'm waiting to hear more from David Grush.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and just a quick point
or down that thread, I guess you could say.
Oh, 100%. And to your point about the effects of the phenomena kind of on people, if you haven't already, and I'm sure you're familiar with her, at least Dr. Diana Pasulka has spent a lot of time looking at that from a religious studies perspective. So analyzing, what communities are doing, what people are doing in response to some of these experiences. What does that look like? Analyzing that from the perspective of religious studies. It kind of has some tangential connection to what you're talking about there. In her second book, she even mentions Dr. E.O. Whiteley, so that would be maybe a good place to start.
Yeah, there's like a chapter on her, pretty much, isn't there? Talking about some of the stuff we've heard that I don't know if it was one of the Apollo or one of the Gemini astronauts that they were hearing a certain type of music that made its way into the cockpit when they were in orbit that should not have been there. Is that right, Debs? Do I have that right?
Yes, there was sounds that they were hearing in space.
Yeah, that sounded musical in nature. There's a good number of UAP sightings as well that hasn't been officially acknowledged that those guys had in flight. So, but yeah, it's a fascinating topic. There's so much to dive into. It is a hobby for us. It's not a job. There are people that are making a living doing this, that are have monetized from day one, which we haven't done. But it just, the conversations that we've been able to have is what we were sort of dreaming about when we started this. And lo and behold, we got to have Lou, and we got to have Jim, and yourself, and I don't know, Chris Lato, and I don't how many people we had. We had all the PhDs from Dr. Pasoklo, Dr. Kreipel, and on and on and on. So that's sort of been the pay that we've received for doing this. As far as Mick is concerned, the reason that I don't publicize him on air is not because he's a skeptic, because I don't think he's a skeptic. I think he's a debunker. I think he takes a dishonest approach, having looked at a lot of his commentary, and I really don't care what he says. So that's why I don't talk about him on air. It's not that I don't think that skepticism is very much valued and needed. I just don't think he is that. I think he's very dishonest in the way he goes about it. And some of the things that I heard him say about your colleagues and their operation of their systems, unless you're a flight examiner in FA-18, I wouldn't be making that commentary myself, and nor would any of my colleagues. So that's why I don't talk about him on air. I don't really care what he thinks.
I consider him a friend.
Awesome. That's cool. I mean, we don't all need to agree on everything, do we? So, but with that said, Alex, I know everybody here really admires you, and I mean everybody in the audience here. We didn't want to keep you past 9:00, but is there a place? There's another question about TikTok. We didn't want to do a TikTok episode here because we know you've been asked about it a lot. It's up to you if you want to field that question or not. There you go. UFO intros. How you doing? Did TikTok take off at great speed, or did it literally vanish? Alex had a wider, higher vantage point, and the language used, it vanished, makes it a little confusing. So can you clarify the nature of its exfil from the area?
It vanished.
Okay. So it wasn't just...
Yeah, just vanished.
Okay. It wasn't like you physically saw it zip by the windscreen at high speed. It just vanished. Okay. That is an awesome question. Thank you. I actually had that question myself, but I know you've been asked so much about that particular event that we didn't want to make this a TikTok episode, if you know what I'm saying. So,
but like, tell me what that means to people. Like, why is that such a point of curiosity? Like, what is
I think, well, from my own vantage point, I'm thinking, if I'm seeing the object, did you visually see the object accelerate and zip again, like I said, zip by your windscreen at a very, very high rate of speed, or did it just vanish? Because that kind of leads you into that it can appear and disappear. So it's another capability that makes it, in a way, even more fantastic, that if it was just using a form of propulsion to accelerate at high speed, but visually so, rather than just disapparate, you know what I mean, and just reappear at that at your cap point?
Mm-mm. Yeah, so I mean, we can sit here and try to rehash all of the technical details, 19 years after the fact. But I don't think that we're ever going to figure out what it is that we saw in 2004. And kind of to circle back and get to my foot stomping underlying point here is that we have to do better about listening to aircrew in the moment or witnesses in the moment, and mobilizing all of our hardware and sensors that we can bring to bear, and then collecting that information in the moment, right? Not 19 years after the fact, trying to do a debrief in this way. And so if we can learn from this and say, hey, we have all these really great technical questions. One of my favorites, I always get asked, did you see a shadow? Right? I don't know. I wasn't looking for a shadow in the moment. But let's do a better job with the checklist, with the template, so that we can have operators with that in mind as they're having an encounter, right? They can have the list of 20 or 50 questions, and then in minutes or hours after the fact, not 19 years later, go through systematically and ask all of these questions in a way that collects it in a standard format, can be ingested, and then again compiled and analyzed with our AI and machine learning and all of that. So we'll put it all in ChatGPT and get it all figured out.
There you go.
Hopefully they have that now. I'm sure. I'm hoping that Intel has these standard template formats to ask these questions, just like they would ask you about any threat or anything that you encounter in debrief. So I'm assuming that they have that, and I don't think that's a bad assumption.
OSHAP did.
What's that? They have it, Debs?
OSHAP did that. They created a giant database, and they did it so that they could search for things and look for patterns and things like that with all of the data combined that they had from multiple organizations, including MUFON.
That definitely is a step forward. We just need to know all of the, hopefully, we'll find out eventually, that there's been data collected from all these sources, and sort of like it won't be 9/11 where they're siloed, but they'll sort of bring it together. I think it's what we thought that this Aero office was going to be. It didn't quite turn out to be that way, but baby steps. I mean, we're a lot further than we were on the day that Alex and Dave had their encounter. I mean, we're much, much further ahead than that. So that makes me feel really good. I think we're headed in the right direction. And the fact you have the Soul Foundation, you have aviators there, you have military guys, intel guys and gals, you had academia there. You couldn't really ask for. What's it, Galileo Project as well? That's right. Mr. Avi Loeb, Professor Loeb. So, I'm sure the conversations you had there offline must have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think, again, I'm curious, and I look forward to learning more, kind of getting up to speed with how we got here, and then seeing where this will evolve, not just in the next year, but in the coming years.
Thank you for doing what you do. Money Nathan, if you could, is there somewhere that you'd like people to contact you? Is it just Twitter that tweeting at you more or less?
I think that was for Alex, not for me. Sorry.
That's for Alex. Yeah.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah. Is there just on Twitter is basically the one social media? Do you use another form of social media that you'd like people to be aware of?
I have Twitter, and then I have an Instagram. It's the same handle, Dietrich VFA 41, and I'm on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And your call sign, is it Cone? Is that your
Cone with a backwards K? Yeah.
With a backwards K. I love it. Conehead. All right. Let's go with Cabby goodbye, starting with Debs.
Yep, I just wanted to reiterate that I have sent you a DM to help with some of that background information. So you're going to be good to go. You've got a lot of reading, but you'll have some fun things for that. So thank you for coming. Of course, if you ever need me for anything, feel free to reach out and I will continue to send you information as well. And thank you again for coming on CAB.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Money.
been great to chat with you. Thank you so much for taking some time out to be with us. I totally approve and appreciate your approach, demanding more evidence and moving this forward, moving this conversation forward with actual information. More information, less speculation. I think that benefits everyone. So I appreciate your advocacy in that regard, and wish you well in 2024.
Thank you.
Alex, thank you so much. So much regard and respect for you as a senior officer, aviator, and that you found a new way to serve, as I put in Twitter, as an educator. And that is something that very, very near and dear to my heart, is someone who chooses their form of service to educate others and be a mentor to, everything from kids to folks that are at the academy, or the Naval Academy and in college. So thank you for continuing to serve. You're definitely a role model for people like myself. Namaste.
Thank you.
All right. On behalf of Alex and Debs and Money Nathan, this is DJ and Cab saying peace out, one love. We'll see you down the road. We're always wondering what's up around the bend.